the counselors as well as the public, especially the public, in terms of what they envision. We do envision having a second meeting probably after the Labor Day holiday, when more folks are in tune with what's going on in terms of vacation schedule and what have you, for a public forum. And ultimately tonight we'll be discussing that in front of the city council in terms of at least where we are tonight. What we will not be discussing tonight, because it's still an executive session, is the actual lawsuit that was held against the city at this point. So I'll let the solicitor kind of go over that in a basic review, but we will not be discussing at this point because we're still in executive session regarding that suit. Okay, so with that, what I'd like to do now is turn it over to the city solicitor, Christine O'Connor, for at least a brief overview, and then we can get into the kind of the history and where we're at and what other communities in the state are actually doing and how they evolved to where they're at today. Ms. O'Connor?
Sure. So in order to make changes, which the city has in fact explored before in various ways, there are essentially three paths that are commonly utilized. One is the Charter Commission, which is a very sort of prolonged process. It's my understanding from speaking to the Secretary of State's office some time ago that charter commissions really are rarely used at this point. It's a process that requires a lot of time and effort, and the results at the end of that are there is no guarantee of a change. Of course, part of the reason is that a charter commission themselves may recommend against any change. In the event that at the end of a, say, 18-month process, after having been appointed and studied the issues, a charter commission actually recommends a change, it would then go onto the ballot for further consideration. And we've done that in the past. More commonly utilized for certain types of changes are special acts, which this council has done in the past and has sought to do, sometimes successfully and sometimes unsuccessfully. And those have ranged from lowering the voting age to changing the number of signatures required for a ballot or for election. And then lastly, there is the ballot initiative. The charter for the city does not contain a provision that allows for a binding ballot initiative. And so although the Mass General laws had previously provided the means for a binding ballot initiative under Chapter 43, Section 43, with the adoption of Plan E, that was superseded, and we would now proceed under Chapter 53, Section 18A, and that would be for a non-binding ballot initiative. I would note that that the city could always request a binding ballot initiative, but again, that would be via the legislature through a special act. The primary difference between, say, the Charter Commission process and that of a special act is that the Charter Commission would be done locally, and all decisions would be made locally. The special act would require legislative approval.
And just so following up, right now, the way it exists now, the council would have to take a vote. Would it be a 2/3 vote or just a majority vote for a binding, the ability to have a binding ballot?
In order to have a binding ballot, the council would have to pass by majority vote a special act.
Okay, and that would actually be what would it entail, what you're actually voting on? So if you made any changes, you'd have to say what those changes were for the binding. Is that how it would work?
Well, any sort of ballot initiative, it would be a yes or no question, and the legislature would have to approve the question and the request from the city to have it as a binding question. So some communities have within their charter the authority to have a binding ballot initiative. We do not, and that's why we would require special legislation in order to do that.
Okay, so the authority then, if you didn't go through a charter commission, the ultimate authority would be the city council? to change you have to change the charter then, correct?
Right, so if you went through a charter commission, it's the charter commission that would study the issue, and at the end of, say, an 18-month period, the charter commission would author what's referred to as a final report. And that final report would come to the council. And that final report would then have to be still approved by the, in order to enact the charter commission, the change, you would send it off to voters as well.
Okay. But then, so ultimately, if we went through, I guess really the other initiatives, the city council could change the actual form of government then, or no? You still would have to go forward before the electorate to have that approved.
I'm sorry, on which one?
Of the three, like the three options, the ballot issue, like when the
Yep.
council here voted to have, like, say, 17-year-olds vote, the council voted for that, correct?
Right.
Okay. And then that was sent to the legislature for approval, and for some reason it just wasn't approved. If that was approved, it would come back to the voters to ratify or approve, correct?
Well, it depends what we request. So we can at times request that it takes effect on approval of the legislature at a date certain, or we could make a request that if the legislature passed something, that it does not take effect until there is a majority vote of the citizenry. So those types of decisions, that type of flexibility would be up to the city when it first makes that request to the state legislature.
Okay, so the city then, in theory, could say we want to make the change on our own. The city council could do that in theory.
In theory,
Okay, but the city council in theory could also say we want to have special legislation for the voters to make a decision on any proposed changes.
correct.
Okay, so it would be within, so if it passed the council to do either or, and it was approved by the state legislature and signed by the governor, then that could be done.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understand that, 'cause so the special acts, then, that's really what we're talking about. That would be the special acts, the second and third item are very similar then, I guess.
Yeah, they are, yes. Yep.
Okay, just a quick question on the Charter Commission, and I know Councilor Samaras and others have questions. The Charter Commission, when was the last time that we did that officially? When was that actually done in the city?
I believe it was back in the early 90s was the last time that there was a charter commission.
Correct,
I don't know if the election office has further information on that.
In 1993, there was there were a few referendum questions on the ballot. It's inconclusive if there was a formal charter commission that was put together, but there were 4 questions in 1993 that did pertain to the charter.
okay. The Charter Commission, there would actually be people who would be elected by the electorate then to serve on the Charter Commission. She would run for that particular seat. Is that correct or is that incorrect? An actual official city charter commission.
An official charter commission, I believed actually they were appointed, but I
By
can.
the city manager, approved by the council, or would they, see, I thought they were actually elected to serve, but I guess we can follow up, we're gonna have a second
Yeah, we
meeting,
can
so these are some of the questions that.
Yeah,
What the purpose really is for all the information to be understood. It's not that I'm an advocate for one or the other, but so people understand that a charter commission is this.
yep,
It's either appointed or it's elected. It takes 18 months or a certain period of time to do something or not to do something. Then ultimately to be before the voters to approve or not to approve.
yeah. It would take an excess of 18 months. 18 months is really once the charter commission begins its work to get to a final report. But in order to get to a charter commission, there's a period of time that it would take to nominate people and get them onto the charter commission.
Okay. And ultimately, the Charter Commission's function would be to make recommendations, whether they change or not change, and ultimately the electorate would approve or disapprove.
Well, if the charter commission came back and recommended against any changes, that would be the end of the process.
Okay, good. Councilor Samaras?
Thank you. I believe actually, maybe the late 70s was the last time there was a major charter commission at that time. And I believe it opened up the doors whether we'd have a strong mayor or a city manager form of government. And the one thing I can recollect and have been informed about, it really involved literally the entire city. And there was a vote as to whether there'd be a strong mayor or city manager. And it ultimately came back a city manager form of government with some changes, okay? Let me ask you this. If we were to create a charter commission again, does that necessarily mean that everything's open? In other words, that they have the right to look at whether we want a strong mayor form, city manager form, or could it be just address the issue of, say, district availability?
Right, I believe that there would be, at the beginning of the process, a defined scope as to why you would want the charter commission.
Okay, you can do that.
I believe so, and I will confirm that in a
All right.
follow-up.
Now, in the event, I mean, and the one thing that I could recall at that time, literally the city was involved. Many editorials about the paper, the radio stations, and what have you. And it was, the talk of the town, and elicited a lot of involvement. Say we were to do something like that, and we got that type of involvement, and there was a judgment made, and it was given to the people to vote on it. Could the courts overturn it if it went against the seeming, in other words, say it went against district representation and wanted to maintain citywide?
Well,
This is, in other words, something that the city gets involved in, and there's a high turnout. I just need this for information.
Well, the results of the Charter Commission ultimately would, among other things, it would be reviewed by the Attorney General's office,
Right.
as well as another state agency. And so, without
If a
speculating...
process, in other words, if a process were followed correctly.
Correct. Without speculating too much in terms of judicial intervention, there would be outside agencies that would review the Charter Commission, I believe, to ensure that that changes that were being made were consistent with Massachusetts Constitution and government bodies in general.
Okay, but of the three processes, this would actually involve more of our citizens than 2 and 3 that you gave.
I don't know that I would necessarily agree in the sense that there would be much more study to the issue, and in fact, at the end of a charter commission, the final report, if it's going to be voted on and be referred to the electorate, every registered voter would get a copy of the final report of a charter commission. So I think the charter commission is by far the most comprehensive approach. It's the one that involves the most study, the most thought, and it's the one that provides voters, arguably, with the most information before they go to the ballot. In terms of actual participation, though, these ballot initiatives also could do the same thing without the formality of a charter commission. And at the end of the day, those are also quite inclusive in the sense that you're going to all registered voters and asking them to weigh in on a particular issue.
Okay, but I like the way you framed the last part of the Charter Commission, the greater involvement, the type of material that would go out to our constituents. And I think that's important. So whatever direction we go in, I think that has to be built into the process. Because I think sometimes what has happened, and I can say like the high school thing, there's been a lack of certain type of information. So this is so important, we want to ensure, because this would be city controlled in a sense, that the information we get out is accurate and sound.
Right, so the type of information that would be delivered to residents as a result of a charter commission would cover a description of what your existing government is.
Okay.
It would also delineate what those changes would be. And it would also, if there were any sort of minority reports as part of this charter commission, it would also provide a summary report to residents as to what the minority view was on this issue.
Thank you.
And I think that's what you're getting at, that there'd be an enormous amount of information that was done in a comprehensive fashion given to voters.
Okay, just quickly, I want to recognize Councilor Mercier here, Councilor Elliott, and Councilor Milanazzo are also in attendance, as is the city manager and former Councilor Vesna Noon. Just to follow up, you could design, without the Charter Commission, you could design a more formal process as well. Council would have that flexibility, correct?
You could have an informal process and at the end of the day rely on some sort of ballot initiative and provide voters with the same information that a charter commission would have provided them with.
So,
The Charter Commission, however, I think, though, if you were going to go through that process, perhaps one of the benefits of the Charter Commission is that it already sort of defines what that process is, and it has set it out for everybody. And you could rely on it and then just follow it.
okay. Quickly, I guess you could design something similar, though, if you wanted to, in theory.
You could, in theory,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Councilor Leahy, any questions? Or okay. Councilor Elliott, I'm not sure if you have any questions at this point, or...
No, I don't have any questions. I think a charter commission is probably a little bit too late. We have we have a lawsuit now that we're faced with, and I mean, personally, there's been a number of attempts over the last 2 decades, as Ed alluded to early, certainly back in 1994, and then to change the voting process and/or procedure, including in 2007, I believe, proportional voting. So I've personally, this is my personal opinion, that the system we have in place, Lowell is the only, with the exception of Haverhill, as far as I know, as far as I have been able to learn, that has an all-at-large system. Most, if not all, of your larger cities have a district and at-large representation system. I think it provides better balance, both geographically, as well as from a diverse perspective throughout the city, and still at the same time, you have at-large seats that provides input from sort of the 30,000-foot view, if you will, that keeps the general interest of the city in mind. So I personally think it's a good system. If most other communities, with the exception of Haverhill, all other communities use something of this nature, then I think that we should be doing it. I don't think a charter commission as you mentioned, it's an 18-month process, and I think that we need to act in a timely manner and put this on the ballot and let the people decide. And so that's all I wanted to say.
Councilor Elliott. Councilor Milanazzo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on some of Councilor Elliott's points and questions, if we look at the entire city being 13.5 square miles, we have, how many wards do we have in the city now?
We have 11 wards and 33 precincts.
We have 11 wards and 33 precincts. So if we decided to go down this route, and again, it might be a little too late from the standpoint of the Charter Commission, but could you also realign the wards? Could you realign the wards so instead of having as many as we have now, so we decide to go a total of 13, maybe have 6 at large and 7 ward representation. So you have 13 instead of 17 or 19. It would really become very cumbersome if you wanted to do it that way. So I just didn't know if you could actually redo the boundaries at the same time if you were talking about changing
Like
the
redistricting,
representation.
basically.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So state law only allows to redistrict after the federal census, so we wouldn't have that opportunity until 2020. We can definitely look into what other options we might have, but currently we'd be looking at after the 2020 census.
2020, okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I guess really I want to lead into having the, Councilor Elliott and Councilor Mercier, then Councilor Elliott. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this particular issue, it is quite known that there are quite a few people that are interested in ward representation. Having said that, personally, I don't really care either way, but the fact remains that I'm a firm believer in this, the people should choose. Now, I know that kind of sounds contradictory when I won't put Lowell High School on the ballot. Having said that, not at this stage of the game of the Lowell High School. It's past the point. But in this relatively new subject, an issue, to put this on the ballot for the people to decide, that would be something that I would support, because we're new with it. It's not like we've put a commission together and we're so far into it. So that is how I feel about it. Personally, I'm very happy with the system that we have right now. Although if I were to add and change anything, I would recommend, but I don't know what the support would be there, to when you have people going to the polls to vote for the councilors, those that would like to be mayor should indicate that with a check beside their name, signifying that they'd like to be mayor, similar to Haverhill. Therefore, the people would choose the mayor, not 9 city councilors choosing a mayor. It would get it out of our hands and put it in the hands of the voter, and I believe, that's what I believe. So having said that, I firmly believe it should go on the ballot. My opinion really doesn't matter. I'm just one person. I like the system the way that it is, but the majority rules. I firmly believe that the majority rules, and so that's where I sit with this issue. And I'm kind of in agreement with Councilor Elliott. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay. I guess what I'd like to do now, and I think it's a good segue really to go into, what we asked Etta to do is really go into really what have other towns have done, what timeframes that they've done it in the Commonwealth, to give us some perspective, and then we can open it up to the public. Again, what I envision, and I think hopefully the council will have the final say, is we'll have another meeting after Labor Day to make sure other people, if they want to come in after summer vacations are over, to weigh in before we make any decisions, and that can be done rather quickly. So I don't know if you could kind of give us a perspective and where other towns are at, and when did they make those changes, if any?
Definitely. So I think it's really important to start the conversation by saying that there's no one way that any community or many communities are handling how everyone is represented, how people are being elected. And that's statewide. There's no one way or a majority way that it's being done. Here in Lowell, we are actually kind of the purest Plan E out there. So upon adoption of Plan E, we really haven't made any changes or alterations to the way that we are voting and that we're electing people. So I'll start with 2 examples that are good examples because they continue to have a mayor-manager combination leadership, and those would be Cambridge and Worcester. In the city of Cambridge, the council is actually elected all at large, but it's selected differently and has been since the 40s using proportional representation. So that, although everybody's elected at large, it differs in tabulation. So that would be something that it's a different way that the equipment is reading the votes. It involves transferring a singular vote to a second or a third choice on the ballot. In Worcester, however, they have a council made up of 11 people, and there are 6 individuals that are elected at large, and 5 are elected by district. So I touched upon the fact that Lowell is pure Plan E. There are some communities out there that were Plan E, and then they transitioned away from Plan E to another plan of government. So I'll give 3 examples of that. The first example would be Gloucester. So Gloucester changed the type of charter that they had by Home Rule Charter in 1975, and they transitioned to 4 elected at-large council members and 5 ward councilors. The city of Medford would be the next example, where they currently have 7 councilors that are all elected at large, but the change by special act charter in 1986 was to have a strong mayor. And the city of Revere, which became Plan B from Plan E, and that was done in 1965. And currently they have 5 elected at-large councilors, and they have 6 ward councilors.
Doing some work online, you can have the variety goes from the gamut where you have, the city of Westfield has 13 city councilors. They have 6 wards, but 7 at large, so they do it a little differently with more at large and less district with a strong mayor. And then you have Newton, which had, I think, 25 elected people, which is probably not the direction we want to go in, but it shows you the extremes of different communities that are within the state at this point. I'm going to open it up to the public now so we can kind of get some feedback, but ultimately what we want to do is have another meeting, to have more people really weigh in, have counselors weigh in. I know counselors have expressed some of their opinions on it, but I think learning the process to what the city solicitor outlined can give us some feedback in terms of what type of direction we want to look at or may want to look at as a full council. I agree with Councilor Mercier regarding how you elect a mayor. I think that actually makes a lot of sense. It's not just a ceremonial mayor. It does run the school committee, and it does have a vote on the school committee. It is an elected city councilor. It's not an executive mayor position, but instead of lining up 5 votes, you actually have the public coming in and making a decision on who will be the head of the city council and ultimately the other voting member and presiding officer of the school committee. I am flexible in terms of the district and the at-large. Coming from a city where my father was actually a ward councilor, I have some, and an at-large councilor, so I have some idea as to how that actually works. It can be a good thing. I think one of the good things here in the city is the city manager function actually works really well. So I'd be hesitant to go into a strong mayor at this point, but I'm going to try to keep an open mind as we listen to the public and ultimately have them make a decision. I think this difference from the high school vote, I think that was referenced tonight, this is actually your form of government. These are the people who are going to make a decision on it. So I think the electorate, the people, ultimately have to make a decision for the public regardless of a lawsuit or not. Ultimately, the people are going to have to decide whether they want to make any changes. And I think we can make strong recommendations, but of how we look at it, what we look at, but ultimately it's going to come down, in my opinion, to what the voters decide, because it's their form of government. So I don't know if any other counselor has any, Councilor Samaras, and after Councilor Samaras, if Councilor Leahy has anything, we'll open it up to the public, come up and speak, and let's hear your opinion. Councilor Samaras.
No, just at this point, I think it's important that actually, whether there was a court issue or not, I think every so often as a city, we have to review our charter. We should review our charter because our city's changing every day. There are different needs every day, and I think this is the right direction. So I don't look at this as we're doing this because there's a potential court action. I think this is something that should be done. Thank you.
Councilor Leahy.
Just one question. When you reference the changes, has anybody changed recently?
So Springfield would probably be one of the cases to point to. Also, the city of Chelsea has changed recently, both for very different reasons. Chelsea did transition from an all-at-large system to more ward representation. They actually decreased the number of signatures required to get on the ballot, and it's had some adverse effects as a whole for the city. So a lot of smaller communities have gone through the charter change process, but in terms of a city, I would really look at Springfield and Chelsea.
Okay, thank you.
Just for edification, what happened in Springfield particularly? When did they change it, and what did they actually change it to?
So Springfield actually transitioned, they've always been a Plan A, but they had more of an at-large system, and they now have a 13-member city council with 5 at-large seats and 8 elected by wards.
When did they make that change?
It was relatively recent.
Okay, great. At this point, I guess we want to open up to the public. I don't know, our format usually is 5 minutes per person. It might be somewhat challenging to get everybody in by our 6:30 timeframe. The goal, I think, what we're trying to do is have another meeting after the Labor Day holiday, really quick, like right after it, to have a public forum so people have a chance to weigh in and have the counselors really listen to you and see what your feedback is in terms of what type of direction you want to have us take a look at. Ultimately, it's your government, so really speak up and tell us what you really think and what your opinions are. So I open it up to the public, and I know Jack Mitchell, if you want to start it off, maybe like get the first person up there might make it easier. Tag, you're it. All right.
All right.
You only get 5 minutes, though. Go.
What do you mean by that? John Mitchell, I'm at 34 Coburn Street, and I will turn my phone on with my notes. First off, I'd like to try to just, let's stick a fork in the Charter Commission idea. We've heard plenty of comments on the pros and cons of it, and then even the idea that there's a way to emulate the Charter Commission without really getting bogged down in what an actual Charter Commission would be. In 2010, a group of neighborhood activists put forth the idea of a Charter Review Task Force, and there are members that are currently sitting at the council now that voted for that. And I think if not that exact model that we had proposed back in 2010, something like that, that's something that you could form a deliberative body. Maybe it could be more informal, meeting at the mayor's reception room, and they could kind of hash things out, different ideas. This council itself has sort of gone over multiple issues of the charter, including signatures and what triggers a preliminary and stuff, and an informal sort of a round table thing with some direction and control might be a good way to sort of hash that sort of stuff out. I have actually a couple of questions. One would be about redistricting, or there's two redistricting. One is if state law only allows redistricting after the census, that might be state law, but that wouldn't necessarily apply to a charter change, because a charter change would be its own separate state law, correct? Or are you not sure?
It would really depend on what we're looking to do with the districts. I mean, we could draw districts for representation using the existing lines.
Okay.
Just to follow up on that question, could you create just districts? You combine, say, I don't know, Ward 1 and Ward 2, and really you have to find it close to even distribution, correct? So you could combine wards for one district. You could create districts, I guess.
You could create districts, you could create neighborhoods, you could kind of use our current wards. It would
As long as the
really,
population equal, you wouldn't have to use the wards, I guess, in theory. You could literally, like you said, create neighborhoods, for lack of a better terminology, basically as long as they were equal in population.
in the current lines are drawn every 10 years to reflect equal population.
So the wards would you would call them in that way districts, and they would change based on the census every.
Potentially they could, every 10 years.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just.
No, that's fine. This is all building on the same idea. I know it was done not long ago, because I have actually a couple of pages that maybe your office produced that came out under Mayor, Councilor Milanazzo was mayor at the time, that showed how each ward was population proportioned and precinct, and then the plus or minus, because they can't make it exactly, right? There's a plus or minus to that. And that leads actually to my other question is, if that software is available, could you potentially experiment with slicing the city up into different, equal population groups, trying with, say, 5 wards or 6 wards or 7 wards, to sort of play with it and sort of see how we could do it to try to, and I think based on my conversation, a lot of people would like to see neighborhoods represented. So if there's software they could kind of fiddle around with and just do some drafts, I think that might be very interesting. The other thing was there are 2 cities, Worcester and Springfield, that I think are interesting to look at. Maybe not to eliminate any of the others, but those are just ones that I've sort of focused on. Worcester has a modified Plan E, and they do things like have the mayor on the ballot for the people to select, which I think is a good idea, and I support that. But I'd also like to look at, say, after their charter changed, how did their voter turnout change? All right, Springfield is another one. Like they went towards, or they went from all at large to a mixed body. I'd like to see not only the inclusion by the people that are actually represented, but maybe how their overall voter turnout changed. And then particularly maybe there were lower turnout areas that spiked up in what those percentages might be. And then sort of closing with Springfield, I know Springfield had tried to do a ballot initiative that was done by their citizenry, so they gathered the signatures. And in that process, there was a requirement that they get the majority of the vote, 50% plus 1, but there's also a requirement that you get some percentage of the registered voters at the time. Maybe that's 33% or 40%, I'm not sure exactly what it was. So they did not get it to pass on the ballot. A lawsuit followed, and then as the lawsuit developed, the city council or the city government came to the conclusion to better just do a home rule petition and change the charter that way. Now, I heard described earlier that if we do a charter, our home rule petition, it goes to the state government up to Beacon Hill, because our charter is state law. Maybe people don't know that, but it's a state law. If we were to do it, say, in 2011, if we had actually formed the Charter Review Task Force and followed up with it and done something with it, that would have been an opportunity to do a home rule petition, send it to the to the Beacon Hill, and then send it back to the city of Lowell for sort of the people to vote on it. Because we have sort of, at this point, a lawsuit, and back to Springfield, they had a pending lawsuit. They did a home rule petition. That went to Beacon Hill. Did it go back to the electorate from Beacon Hill for sort of affirmation? Or because it was a settlement to a pending lawsuit, was that sort of the completion of it? And if you have that answer, that'd be interesting to know tonight, but if not...
But I think it's something we should get an answer to, because what you're saying, I mean, do you need a certain percentage to show up to vote? I mean, that's a good question. Or if you go through the legislature, can you just have, say 12,000 people show up, then they're gonna make that decision? I mean, ultimately, just not to step out of bounds of the chairperson rule, I think we should vote on it, but I get the concern, if you need 25% to show up and you only get 23, what happens at that point? Go ahead.
Right, and with respect to the special legislation, you wouldn't have to send it back to voters, but you could. And if you did, I think the common practice is to just seek a simple majority of those who actually go and vote on that particular day. We will follow up with...
But you can follow up. I mean, I think that's important to know, because it's an important question. If whatever the number is, 33% need to show up and you can never get that number, then that proposes a challenge, I think, inherently.
Yeah, we'll follow up also on the Springfield issue, though, as to, I believe it was, there was a finality to it, and that it didn't go to the voters, but we'll check on that.
Okay. Any other citizen would like to speak at this time? Okay. Just state your name and your address, please.
We have to.
And don't get electrocuted, it would be nice too.
Bob Farr, 56 Methuen Street in Lowell. I think a couple of things. One is to be, I would say, listening to everything, to be careful not to make this way more complicated than it has to be by talking about charter changes and all these other things. To me, in having read the lawsuit and listened to the discussion, it's pretty simple on the one hand. Do we think that the structure of voting makes sense or doesn't make sense? Should there be some way to represent neighborhoods more democratically than there is, I think, at present? And so it seems like that's question number one. The other part of it is that whether 35% show up to vote or it goes to the electorate or whatever it is, if the system of voting violates federal law, it doesn't matter. It has to be fixed. It's like saying that in the South in the 60s, because of segregation, well, this is the way people voted and this is the way people wanted it, so it was okay. No, that's what the Voting Rights Act was for. And we've heard a lot about it, obviously, in the last few weeks of our current events. And so ultimately, that has to be factored in, that if you say to the voters of the city, you can decide, but the voters decide otherwise, but they're on the wrong side of the law, and I don't know that yet, right? But that's what's to be discussed at some future point. Then it doesn't matter. So I feel like, at least for now, we ought to not burden this with how many people are going to vote and what percentage of the voters need to vote and what would the neighborhoods look like. It seems like there's a fundamental question in that. If the fundamental question is answered, the other things slowly begin to fall in place, because then cooler heads prevail and people can sit down and figure it out. But as long as we're trying to thread a needle that's so complicated, I feel like we're going to be stuck, and it's just going to take longer than it probably needs to take. And in a way, that's what Springfield found out. I'm familiar with what happened in Springfield, and in the end, they realized we just ought to just sit in a room and figure this out, because otherwise it's going to cost a lot of money and it's going to make a lot of people upset and angry. It's going to polarize the city, none of which is good for the city of Springfield, or in this case, the city of Lowell, moving forward. Thank you.
No, I think that's an interesting point. We should get more of the history in some of these cities that made these changes and what they went through. I think ultimately that I don't know how you escape the electorate making a decision, though, but I think you make a good point. I think you can get boiled down into the details pretty quick. Any other citizen would like to speak before we? Oh, sure, thank you. Just state your name and your address, please. Thank you. Yeah, don't get electrocuted either, yeah. You can bring it down, it won't, yeah, you'll be fine.
And I just want to advocate for, as you're doing that public meeting process, really thinking about that as something that you're going to have to devote resources to, because the people that you really want at that meeting are the people that it's hardest to get to that meeting. You know, if you wanted to have a meeting that all of us in the room are at, you could do that right now. But you want to have the people that didn't even know that there was this meeting, that don't even know how this process works. You really want to attract the most disenfranchised people to ask them why the system isn't working for them, or whether it isn't, like maybe it's fine. So I think you want to think about having public meeting that has translation, having a flyer that you put up a lot of places, and trying to figure out how you have a process that's welcoming to all sorts of different kinds of people, and doesn't feel like it's only for the people that always show up, but that really is welcoming to everybody in the city, and especially the people that are difficult to reach. And I think the city's really been working hard on that lately, really putting more energy into that, and I really appreciate it. And I think it just is always work. It's just really hard to get people to show up for those kind of meetings. And I think if that's the way you're going to make the decisions, you really have to make sure that you're budgeting for it on a lot of different levels, both making sure that there's money set aside for translation that's guaranteed, and making sure that there's energy that's going into promoting the meeting and letting people know that it's happening.
Well, thank you very much for the feedback. It's good information, and something we need to take in consideration, something that we should be doing at our next meeting. Any other citizen would like to speak tonight? Okay. We do plan, to have, what I would envision at this point, I don't know if any other counselor has anything to say tonight. Oh, Councilor Miller, okay. I guess ultimately what we envision at this point is we are going to set up a second meeting. We have to put a little more thought into terms of where we're going to do it and how we're going to do it. What I'd like to do, though, is make sure, Madam City Solicitor, that we do get information regarding Worcester and Springfield, a good background, and why did they do what they did in terms of the changes, because I think it's good to get that context in terms of what happened. We're going to have to take a look at the percentage of voters and how that actually works as well. Ultimately, I think this is a good start to what we want to look at and have a public forum in terms of people expressing their thoughts and getting to the city councilors and really educating the city councilors in terms of, how are we going to go about the process of reviewing Plan E form of government? Do we want to make any changes, and what format do we go through? I think that's good, and I think if there's any other information, I don't know if I'm missing anything, make sure we added everything. I think what we need to do is really, as the previous speaker said, really reach out, probably go on the road in terms of going out, getting folks who can reach out to people, interpreters, what have you, to make sure we're getting every part of the community. That's going to be a challenge, but we should at least put that effort in, and I think we're up to that task. So I don't know, Madam Solicitor, if you have anything to end with.
I was just going to add, I agree, and I also think that even in the early voting that we just had, the election office was recognized by the state as really doing just that, compared to probably any other community in the Commonwealth, was able to reach more neighborhoods and be one of the most inclusive processes for implementing early voting.
No, definitely, and that's something that we should be taking pride in. And I think ultimately we need to take to the next step as we set up that second meeting and make decisions whether we're going to have more meetings or make some decisions after that. But definitely, we'll be scheduling another meeting. It probably won't be here at City Hall, but we'll get it out there so we make sure folks have a good comfort level, how to get there, and go from there. And we'll definitely make sure LTC shows this again and again and again, and we'll make sure it's as interpreters. I don't know if any other counselor wants to speak. I guess what I would do at this point is request that we have a motion as report of progress to the City Council as a motion. Councilor Samaras, second by Councilor Leahy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And I make a motion, we look for a motion to adjourn by Councilor Samaras, second by Councilor Leahy. All those in favor, aye. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate the time.